Oh no, my sandwich was in there.
Today on Film Learnin, we're doing this. Hey guys, welcome to Film Learnin, the show dedicated to learning you some filmmaking and learn you good. And I actually had this request a couple of times during one of our live stream episodes, and it's of course the Beast Boy effect from DC's new show, Titans. Now confession time guys, I haven't actually seen any episodes of Titan as yet.
My God.
Yeah, I deserve that, but I'm just basing this effect on one particular clip that I saw online. And this is where Beast Boy's eyes turn a different colour and turn to an animal shape, then his skin starts to turn green, and finally he juts out his teeth. So that's what we're doing today, gang. Now in order to complete this effect, you need to shoot your actor acting kind of beastly, and just make sure they're not moving around too much, because how we're doing this is rotoscoping. And if anyone knows anything about rotoscoping, you really don't want your actor moving around too much because it's going to take a long time to roto. Even with something as good as Mocha 2019 inside of After Effects, it's still going to take some time. So make sure your actor doesn't move around too much, and also make sure they're not showing a lot of skin, because every bit of skin that they have on screen, you're going to turn green, okay? Now, you got all that? Well, let's get to work, shall we? Okay guys, here we are in After Effects. I've got my shot set up in a comp and ready to go. Now I just want to start off by saying that I'd highly recommend that you shoot this in either a close-up or a medium close-up at the very least, because it's going to help with the tracking. I thought before we jump into it, I might just do a quick breakdown of everything that's going on in this shot. Believe it or not, but the final shot here actually has quite a few layers for what is essentially a pretty basic effect. We firstly have our pupils on top that are isolated, then we have the iris which is coloured, we then have the teeth animating on, we then have the inside of the mouth, and then finally we have the skin that animates on green. Every single element here requires tracking and rotoscoping. So let's get started with this, shall we? So the first thing we need to do is find the point on the timeline where we want the effect to begin. This looks pretty good right here. From there, I'm going to hit Ctrl-Shift-D to split the clip, and then we'll right click and pre-compose, and let's name this Beast. Now it's time to start tracking. Let's head to Effect, BorisFX, and grab Mocha. Now gang, if you aren't working in After Effects CC, you'll have to head up to Animation and hit Track in Mocha. But I'm in After Effects 2019 and Mocha 2019, and it lives here now. So let's launch Mocha. Oh, and I'm working with the Pro version guys, but this all works in the Mocha AE version too. So here we are in Mocha. Now the first thing I want to track and isolate is the skin around my face and neck. So I'll grab the X-Spline tool up here, and I'll draw a mask around my face and neck. Now gang, we want to take our time and make this nice and detailed and really tightly fitted on the skin, as we're going to be colouring this layer, so any overlap onto the background or parts of, say, my clothing is going to be really noticeable. Nice. Once that's done, let's hit Ctrl-A to select all the points, and I'm just going to bring this in slightly just to smooth them out. Not too much, or we're going to lose our shape detail. From there, I'm going to increase the pixel percentage to 90% and hit the Track Forward button. Right, that's all done now. So we can see that the track follows the basic movements of my face, but as you can see on the edges here, it does slip a little when it comes to, say, subtle movements in my cheeks, and of course, the sudden jutting out of my jaw. So we'll need to adjust these intermittently in Mocha as we move along the track. Now gang, I have covered this pretty extensively in the past, as recent as the Venom face effect, which is in the card above. So in this case, I'm going to skip ahead until I've made all the adjustments. Okay, now when I've played my tracking back, you can see that it sticks to my face and neck, animating with my movements. Honestly guys, this isn't hard, it just takes a little time and patience. Now I've also renamed this layer to face, and I'll be doing this for each of my tracking layers because I'm not an idiot, and when we're applying these effects, we kinda need to know what layers are what. Now if I said, hey, we're done tracking and rotoing, I'd be lying guys, because we've got a lot more to go. Our next track is our mouth, gang, specifically the inside of our mouth. Now as far as I know, Beast Boy's skin only turns green and not his innards, so I think it's important to isolate them as well. Now for this track, I think I'm going to get to the end of the comp and go backwards since my mouth is super open and wide, and then it shuts down quite a bit. So I'll grab my X-Spline tool. There we go. And I'm going to draw around the mouth here. Done. I'll just make sure that we're on 90% pixels. Yes, we are. And let's just go ahead and skip to when I've got this tracked and all adjusted. Done. So here is what that looks like now. Now we have a couple more areas to track here, gang. It's time to move up to the eyes. Now I mentioned before that when Beast Boy starts to change, his eye color changes first. So we need to isolate two different parts of the eye, the iris and the pupil. That way when we add our color correction to the iris, our pupil remains the same color throughout the entire shot. Now gang, tracking these involves the exact same process. Draw the spline, track the object, and naturally we follow that up by making any adjustments needed. The only difference here is that I'm only tracking translation. Because honestly guys, I don't move around a lot in this shot, so there's no real reason to track rotation, scale, and shear. So just translation is fine. So let's skip forward until I've done both irises. Done. Okay, now onto the pupils. Now the reason I'm showing this tracking guys is because I want to show you a tip. When you're tracking an object that's fairly small and dark in my case, the pupil bleeds into the eye because my lighting choice, well, it's not that great on one of the eyes. So how do I track this? Well, we cheat the track. How so, Grant, you might ask? Well, I'll show you. What we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our eye layer, and then all we're going to do is adjust those keyframe points so that they only contain the pupil now. And then all we have to do is just go along to each of our adjusted keyframe points and either delete them or adjust them to contain the pupil only as well. And what you end up with is a perfectly tracked pupil. Pretty easy, huh? Let's then follow that up by doing it to the other pupil. Now guys, I'm also going to head up here and hit this show planar surface thing. And as you can see, it brings up a little blue box. Basically what this is these four corners here represent our corner pin data. Now, in the case of this particular shot, I want that corner pin data to stretch out the entire length of our footage. So I'm also going to hit this expand planar surface to the entire frame. And if I zoom out, you can see our corner pin data is now out to the entire frame. This is going to help us when we're modifying our pupil shape a little bit later. Now I'm also going to follow up and do that with the other pupil as well. Done and done. Now, guess what guys? That is all of our tracking done. Well, for now, but I'll explain that later on. Let's now save and head back to After Effects. Okay, so back in After Effects, we've got a little bit of work to do. Firstly, we need to duplicate our layer of our actor 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's start by turning all of them off and we'll work our way up. Now the first layer, turn that on, is our background. Now we aren't doing anything to that. Our second layer is going to be our skin layer. So let's open up the effects controls, and of course here's Mocha. We want to collapse down the matte settings. We can then check apply matte and bam, nothing happens. And that's because we have our background layer on. If I solo this layer, you can see we have our face completely isolated and animated. Looks pretty cool, huh? Now since this is a pretty accurate roto, I'm only going to increase the feather to 2 because I don't want any spill. Next, it's time to go green. For this, I'm going to use Color Easter 4 from Red Giant, but gang, you can use any coloring plugin you want. Just try to avoid using hue and saturation, as I found that the moment I introduced a lot of green, I got a lot of noise. So avoid it if you can. So you can see I'm not going super crazy with the color grade here. I'm just adding some green to all of the 3 color wheels and just trying to find a balance. I might also lower the saturation, as that still feels that it's a bit too green. If I turn it on and off, you can see the end result. Now, we gotta fade this in guys, and naturally that's pretty easy too. All we need to do is hit T to bring up opacity, crank it down to 0, and I'm gonna move ahead around 1 to 2 seconds on the timeline, Then I'll hit the stopwatch. I'll then skip ahead, say another second, and crank it up to 100. Let's check out a preview. Now the reason we skipped ahead that first second was to give ourselves some time before the skin turns green to bring the colour of our eyes changing colour. But let's bring in the mouth now, guys. We'll turn on the next layer, and from the matte menu, let's select our mouth mask and bam! Our mouth is all masked out and that looks pretty good. Now guys, I'm going to increase the feather on this one to around 20. This will give us a much more natural feel, like the green fades off into the mouth as it goes in, further selling our digital makeup. Now, onto the eyes. Have you noticed how much easier this is in After Effects now that the tracking's doing the work for us? I know, right? Damn, I love Mocha. Righto. Let's move on to the next layer. In Mocha and Matte, we'll set the settings to IL and IR. This is why it's important to name your layers in the hierarchy, because it makes things a hell of a lot easier. I'll also set the feather to 2. Now before we continue to add effects to this layer, I'm going to turn on the top layer and change the matte settings to our pupil tracks. Done. This way we can see what the final result will look like with our normal colour pupils overlaid. Okay, so back down to the iris layer. And basically all I've done again here, guys, is just add calories to 4 and just adjusted those colour wheels until I got a result that I like. If I turn it on and off, you can see the dramatic difference between the coloured layer and the uncoloured. Now all we have to do now is hit T, head to the start of our footage layer, crank it to 0, hit that stopwatch. We'll then move forward say 20 frames or so and crank it up to 100. If we check out a preview, we now have our eyes turning green, followed by our skin. Nice. Our next step is to change our pupil shape, and this is super easy thanks to our tracking. Let's add a new solid, grab the eyedropper tool, grab our pupil, boop. We'll then select our pupil layer, go to Mocha effect, and collapse down tracking data. From there we want to hit create track data, grab our pupil L layer, select corner pinward motion blur, and set the layer export to the solid. Done. Our tracking data is now applied to that solid. Now let's turn the solid layer off, grab the pen tool, and let's draw a small triangle shaped mask on the eye like so. Let's then hit F and feather it out around 2 pixels. Once we turn the layer back on, you can see it changes the shape of our pupil to kind of an animal shape, and it's perfectly tracked to our eye. Now to animate this on is super easy too, guys. Head to the first frame of our footage layer, hit Ctrl-Shift-D to split the clip and delete that excess at the start, and we'll then hit MM to collapse down the mask menu and hit the stopwatch on mask path. We'll then scrub forward say 15 frames and add a keyframe. From there, let's head back to our first keyframe at the start of the footage, and then we're going to just bring this point up like so, and that'll hide the solid layer. If we check out a preview, you can see the pupil sort of bleeds down and changes with the eye color. We can then follow the same steps with the other eye, making sure that you use the eyedropper to pick that pupil just in case it's a different color, and of course, export the tracking data for that eye. What you're left with is this. Nice, huh? Now gang, there is one more effect added to the final shot, and that's adding the teeth that spring out. For this, I'm actually going to recommend another tutorial maker's video, as I actually used his technique to do mine. Ignace from Tolerated Cinematics has a very detailed tutorial on a vampire fangs effect that you can view by clicking the card on screen right now. Now since I used his tutorial to make the teeth, I'm not going to cut his grass by showing you that in this episode, as I wouldn't be adding anything new, and quite frankly, he deserves the views. It's a really good tutorial. The only difference between his effect and mine is that my tooth transition was a bit faster and I actually hit it in a jaw movement. So by all means guys, check out his tutorial and let him know that Grant sent you. And that, my friends, if we add all that up, is another effect. Done. Add up all those steps and get something like this. Today on Film Learning, we're doing this. So guys, that's my take on a Beast Boy effect from DC's Titans. As you can see, it's a relatively easy effect to pull off, it's just all that roto and tracking could drive you nuts if you let it.
You like them big hairy balls, don't you?
But for now guys, that is my time. If you did enjoy this episode, please smash that like button, I really do appreciate it. And hey guys, if you are new here, hit that subscribe button and turn that notification bell on so you don't miss a single Film Learnin episode. And also guys, a quick update on the 100k short film competition. All the entries have been received. Entries are officially closed, and in the next month or so I'll be able to judge all of those, get in our guest announcers and do the award show, so keep an eye out for that. But for now guys, let's close this one out. I've got 2 other episodes of Film Learnin right over here. I've got my social media crap above my head. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can hit that up there, or you can become a Film Learnin sponsor by hitting the join button below, and if you're in the US, you can also check out our merch stuff right down there. But until I see you again guys, keep learning!